Hi everyone, I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about how we at James Madison University have been able to use ExamSoft data to objectively determine how our courses are meeting the student learning objectives. And let me advance this slide, I apologize for that. And so by meeting our course objectives, also we are meeting our AACN student learning outcomes. For those of you not in nursing, AACN is the American Academy of Colleges of Nursing, and it's one of the main accrediting bodies in nursing education. So as my bio said, I've been at James Madison University since 2008, and I've been the testing coordinator for the undergraduate program since about 2012. And that's about the same time we started using ExamSoft and having our students use iPads for testing. And so our students all bring in their own iPads to every exam, and that's the way that we do that. We don't have computer lab space. Um, so although generating data, testing data took a lot of time and a little more data is added semester by semester, we're getting to that point where we're able to see what the data is and start to draw some inferences. So what does that data mean? Our objectives for today are to discuss the data, using data to demonstrate achievement of course objectives, using data to look at how we're looking at AACN outcomes or learning SLOs, and discuss how to use testing consults for continual quality improvement. So just some background to see where we were and kind of get you up to speed on where we're going. At James Madison University, like I said, we started with ExamSoft in about 2012. I was pretty well involved with curriculum development up until that point, having been on the curriculum committee since 2010. Around 2011, I took on the role of chair of the curriculum committee, and that's when I really thought to myself, what are we doing to really prove that we're meeting these outcomes? And at the time, we didn't really have a good plan. We would bring faculty in, and faculty would answer the couple of questions. You know, what's going well in your course and what needs to be improved in your course. And it was pretty subjective information. But now we're able to say, using the ExamSoft data, can you show us that those objectives were met? And that's what I'm going to do today, is talk to you about how we actually did that in one course. So in the past, we relied on faculty to say they covered information. We had faculty discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the course. Testing and assessment data was available with the Scantron system, which I'm sure a lot of faculty have used in the past. That relied on individual faculty to go out and collect their own data, collate and interpret their own data. Whereas now, with a testing coordinator overseeing the data, that can be collated and kind of pushed to the individual faculty who need to take a look at it. So way back during the Scantron days, there was not a good way to close the loop and demonstrate that changes were made other than those usual assurances from faculty that was covered. And in addition to that, there was not a consistent and reliable way to demonstrate that students met the course objectives. And that's something the AACN was interested in finding out from us, is could we demonstrate that we've met the objectives, and moving away from this just assurances that yes, we did do it. So some background. What we did when we set up ExamSoft was try to come up with a plan so that when we wanted to do some data diving, that we would have it set up in a way that made sense for us and our particular needs. And it would make it easier to get into the data specifically and gather the information. And so the category tree is what we first talked about setting up. And we decided it was important for us to have 4 main categories and then some subcategories underneath of each. And so these categories were intentionally chosen so that we would be able to determine the cognitive level of each question, the body system or content area, the NCLEX category, and I'll talk about that again in a second, and the AACN student learning outcome category for each item. So a couple of these items, the body systems and content area and the Bloom's mandatory categories, are important for individual faculty. So when they're making their exams, they can use that to build. The Bloom's category, the NCLEX categories, and the student learning outcomes are kind of the other categories that I use in data diving so that I can see how we're meeting the essentials. So if you're not familiar with nursing, the NCLEX is the National Licensing Examination, and this licensing examination test map looks at physiologic states, psychologic integrity, etc., as their breakdown areas. And if you were to expand the NCLEX category here, you would see that that's how we have expanded the category tree so that we can tag our questions and see how we can better see how we're assessing for NCLEX and then how we're meeting our student learning outcomes. So let's move forward to the next step in this. The next step, as we were setting up ExamSoft, was thinking about folder trees. And so the folder tree is how you're storing your exams or your question items. We decided as a school that we are going to we are going to store our items as just items within courses rather than by exam type. So for our folder tree, our main categories are our semesters. So there are 4 semesters in our nursing school. You come in as a junior, so you have junior 1, junior 2, senior 1, senior 2. And so we have semesters 1 through 4, and then underneath of each of those semesters, there are sub-level categories for the actual courses. So for semester 1, there's course nursing 350, 351, 352, and 353. And then the way that we store the questions is under the types of questions. So in nursing 353, which is a pharmacology course, there are questions on antipsychotic drugs, antibiotics. And under antibiotics, there's more sub-levels of types of antibiotics and other questions about that. So when we were thinking about folder trees, one of the things that came up was that some other schools store this by exam. So under 353, it would be exam 1, exam 2, or final exam 1, or midterm exam 1, etc. For us, we felt like we do a lot of course revamping, and that wasn't going to suit our needs because we would want to be able to adjust that, and it's easier for us and the way that we do things to do it by category. Okay, so that's a little bit of our background, and so since each item is tagged with the categories as previously mentioned, and then stored in the course where it's going to be used, it's easily available for each individual user. And it's easy for me to go in and search for tagged categories if I need to look at specific learning objectives. So I talked about being highly involved in curriculum and the quality assurance process. And since we have ExamSoft at our fingertips and lots of data at our fingertips, we were really thinking about how can we use this better and use it in more of a proactive way rather than a reactive way to both meet our student needs but also meet the accrediting standards. So the way that we decided to do that is that at the beginning of each semester, faculty, as you're developing course content and assessments, faculty go ahead and develop their exam blueprint. And this is a snapshot of what an exam blueprint might look like. In the beginning of this, before we got really involved with the data, it was broadly determined by the time spent on a topic area in the class, and we would say a number of questions. So if you were studying cardiac and you were studying specifically myocardial infarction, maybe you spent 1 hour on that, and that relates to 6 questions on your exam. So we decided to take that a step further, and not only do we want to know how many questions for MI are on your exam, I would like to know how many of those questions relate to your course objective So course objective 1, 2, 3, or 4. So that's what this blueprint does now. So it takes blueprinting just that one step further. So we can look at each individual question. We know what its ID and revision number is within ExamSoft, and look at each individual course objective. So like I said, this is a snapshot of a course. This is Nursing 353, which is pharmacology. And in this course, there are 4 exams and then one other quiz called an MCAS. That's our medication calculation and safety test. And so this is the test students must take before they can give medications in clinical. So it's medication calculation and that type of thing. So if you look at this, you can see the plan distribution on the Excel spreadsheet, but then I was able to take that information and make a pie chart. And so for this pie chart, what it's looking at is each number or color, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, correlate to the course objectives for this course. So there are 7 course objectives. These course objectives also correlate directly to the student learning outcomes provided by AACN. And so what this is doing is a visual to say that for course objective number 1, that's where I've spent most of my time reassessing students' learning. So students have the majority of questions there, but they didn't have that many questions related to student learning objective number 2. And so that leads us in curriculum quality assurance to say, what is it about question 2 that it's not being captured in this assessment of student learning via exams? Is it captured in some other way through essays or clinical practice or something else? So there are some things that ExamSoft doesn't cover. So is it covered there? And if not, do we need to do more on that particular objective? And so in this case, it looks like we actually need to do more to assess student learning of this objective number 2. Using ExamSoft, we were able to also look at it in a different way. And so we can use the pie chart to see, hey, it was covered, but we can also look at the average exam scores across all exams for each of these objectives. So overall, these are our overall course scores. 93.3% was the high and 67 was the low. And so we can say, in general, most of our students demonstrated mastery of each of these course objectives. But what I can also do is go into each individual course objective. So for course objective 1, what were those average scores, etc. And then by using that information, we're able to advise faculty on how to revise the course or revise their assessments. So part of course level assessment for us is also looking at exam performance. And so we do a lot with the pre-planning, setting up course content, looking at how questions will be distributed across an exam to meet both the course objectives and the student learning objectives. But then after that's done, we go back and we do some more assessment. So did the exam perform well? We feel like it's not enough to say we covered a topic and that the average score on the topic was whatever percentage. After every exam, we look at the test statistics to analyze exam performance and item performance as well. Our School of Nursing has a policy on test analysis, and faculty can use that as a tool to guide exam analysis. And I can share those specifics after the webinar, or if anyone would have specific questions during the QA period, if you'd like to know specific information. So we use specific recommendations for the KR, the difficulty level, the point by serial, etc. Our National Licensing Exam in Nursing, which is the NCLEX, test items at the application level. And so to prepare students for this, part of our testing policy is that we recommend most items for all exams are at the application level or higher in regards to cognitive level. And so that means for us at level semester 1 student who's just beginning the nursing program might have up to 20% comprehension and knowledge questions, but as they've progressed further through the program, they're going to have less and less. and ExamSoft does help us to determine that. So moving on, talking further about course level assessment and performance, we're looking at things longitudinally. So these longitudinal reports help us to guide course level assessment in a couple of ways, using data across several exams. Student performance in key categories can be demonstrated. So in this example, the exams in this course are tagged with the NCLEX category, and the NCLEX categories are on the screen. So physiologic integrity, and physiologic integrity itself has some sub-level categories on the NCLEX, and that's actually what we're tagging. So in this particular course, basic care and comfort had there were 2 exams that covered questions on basic care and comfort, and there were 6 items total. For farm and parental therapies, there were 4 exams that covered this topic with 114 questions. And so I can say with feeling pretty certain about it, that if we have students taking 114 questions on farm and parental therapies with an average score of 84%, that the students are demonstrating learning. So this is one of the ways that we're doing that. So this is a little snapshot of the NCLEX category tree for this course, but we do this for all of the categories that we tag. Okay, next we're looking at thinking about trends. So continuing with course level assessment, wondering how courses are performing over time. ExamSoft has been a great tool for us so that we can look at exactly what we're doing. And so for this particular course, this particular slide is looking at how we're looking at Bloom's cognitive level for each exam by semester. And I said before that we were really focusing on application level or higher for the NCLEX, and that's what we're striving for. And you can see in the beginning, fall 13, we had 16% knowledge and 25% comprehension of all exam questions. And we thought we were doing pretty well until we had this data that proved that, we are still spending a lot of time testing knowledge and comprehension and not really application. And so over time, we're trying to improve that and increase the distribution. One of the things that we found as we're going through looking at all of our data is that we're having varying levels of expertise among faculty. And that's to be expected because faculty in nursing are generally nurses first and teachers second. And this is oftentimes an area that needs a lot of help. And so we thought, well, let's give our faculty some help and create these testing consults. And these were developed to help faculty identify areas for improvement in terms of both item writing and exam development. And since we know it's a skill set that develops over time and that items often need revision and refinement in order to perform as anticipated, we thought we just needed to give our faculty as much help and support as we can. So there are multiple factors that contribute to exam performance. So some of these things don't have to do exactly with how the faculty's skill level, but some of it does. And so things that contribute to exam performance are the time spent on the topic in class, the exam content distribution, faculty skill level, student preparation and student focus. So student preparation during the exam and also during the whole course coming up to the exam. So lots of things were going into it, and we really wanted a non-punitive approach, that we were just really supporting and helping faculty meet their own goals and not coming at them in a way that didn't seem supportive. So testing consults allow an independent third party to view the statistical performance of exams and items and also the exam blueprints. And so we looked at the exam blueprint to see, well, what was the plan? Then we looked at the exam itself and the items to say, did the exam and the items kind of correlate back to that blueprint? And if not, where were the gaps? Could we identify big gaps of knowledge there, or big gaps of assessment there? Could we improve the course by improving how we're attacking the information? So this was proven to be helpful for faculty hoping to improve exam performance and reliability of exams. And we'll talk a little bit further about that on the next upcoming slides. So some of the things that we looked at in the testing consults were both exam level performance, but also item performance. So we looked at the KR20 to look at the exam performance. So was the exam reliable? Would we have gotten the same score from the same students if they took the same exam again? That kind of thing. So in one course that we assessed, the course had 9 course objectives to be assessed, and we looked at one examination. So we thought we'll start there, take one exam, the 9 course objectives, and see what was happening. And in this particular exam, there were 79 items on the exam, and they assessed 7 of the course objectives, although 3 of those were addressed with 1 or 2 questions. So really it addressed 4 course objectives. And this was something that was eye-opening to faculty because they hadn't really maybe looked at each individual course objective in the past. They looked at their content and their lesson plans without necessarily taking that extra step back. So this eye-opening loop was or eye-opening portion was important to faculty, just so that they knew to close the loop on that. And in this particular course, in this particular exam, the faculty had 128 unit objectives. So for each unit that they taught, say on Tuesday they taught cardiac, and on a Wednesday they taught pulmonary, and on Thursday they taught endocrine. Among all of those individual classes, there were 128 unit objectives. And so for faculty, what this did was show them that maybe they could pare down their unit objectives and or be more specific about what each unit objective did. Did the unit objectives link back to the course objectives, which link back to the student learning outcomes? So in this particular course, the majority of unit objectives were unaddressed because there were only 79 items on the exam. And so that just allowed the faculty to think about that and to approach the next course or the next course exam with a different approach. So some of the things that we asked ourselves during the testing consults when we noted that there were so many unit objectives, so we wondered, were the unit objectives too narrow in scope, too broad in scope, or repetitive? And what we actually found was that the unit objectives were very repetitive. And so even it looked like we weren't meeting all of the unit objectives, but since they were repetitive, we did meet a lot more than we thought. So kind of my thought for that was the ExamSoft data is great. It gives us a nice objective lens to look through, but it only works if everything is lined up well. And so in this case, yeah, it didn't look like we were meeting all of our course objectives, but to step back and look at a little more qualitative piece of it, we could see that, yeah, we were a little bit more. So making sure everything is structured well and lining up is really key, in making sure that the examinations, assessment, and course level assessment is working for you. So some of the other things that we were thinking about, for our particular program, we wanted a KR level of greater than 0.65. And this particular exam had a KR level of 0.47, which looks at the internal consistency of the exam. And so even though this particular exam had near normal score distribution, it required a little bit of scoring adjustment. So that gives faculty a place to begin and to look at where can they start making changes. For testing consults, we're looking closely with faculty at their items. At item level of difficulty, we recommend that non-mastery items should be around 30 to 70%. And for most questions, in most of our exams, I would say that is true. There are several questions that are at a very easy level, and we're trying to work with faculty about being more careful with those easier questions. So something with a difficulty of 0.9, for instance, faculty are encouraged now to look at those questions and not just accept them because the students all got them correct, but to look at the question and say, is this a mastery question? Does the student need to be able to answer this correctly no matter what? And if you answer yes to that, then keep the question, because you do need some mastery level questions. But if it's not a mastery question and it's looking deeper at critical thinking, going back, encouraging faculty to go back and revise the question to increase the difficulty level is what we're doing. We're also looking at point by serial for each question. And for the examination that I'm talking about that we were assessing, most of the items were pretty good, although some of the questions were below the point by serial of 0.29. And so it allowed faculty to really look closely at that and think about how could they improve those questions. So in addition to looking at those things, we looked at the cognitive level of each item. And so for these questions on this particular exam, we found that there were 16 analysis questions, 10 application questions, and there were 79 questions on this exam, but those were the only questions that were categorized with cognitive level. So I couldn't come up with any more information for faculty other than to say, please tag your questions with your categories, and I can get back with you in the future as you deploy more and more exams. So it was also a time for faculty to reflect on how they're using ExamSoft themselves so that we can get better data. So concluding with testing consults, some of the things that we ended up doing, we talked to faculty about your exam performance overall, individual item performance, mapping the blueprint of the exam to the course objectives and the course objectives to the student learning outcomes. And what we really need to do with faculty is work with them to make sure their unit objectives correspond to course objectives. Helps us to keep on track in terms of meeting student learning outcomes, and it helps the curriculum as a whole, so that because we're really focusing and hoping that each individual course is meeting its course objectives. But if it's straying, so if curricular drift is occurring, making sure that we're doing testing consults and using ExamSoft to its greatest benefit is really helping us keep on track. The other consideration for faculty is if the exam items corresponded to their course objectives. So being more cognizant about that and making sure there's a good distribution of items across each and every course objective. And if it's not something, if it's a course objective that is not assessed in terms of an exam, so it's assessed in another way, just being cognizant of that and making sure that it is assessed in some other way to close the loop on curricular quality assurance. So in conclusion, for us, what we found was really necessary to make sure that we were able to meet our accreditation standards and demonstrate that with the data. We needed a strong setup in ExamSoft. So the category tree structure was important, making sure it was set up clearly. And then some more preparation types of things, having good exam blueprints, having a plan for exam analysis, and having faculty understand how to analyze exams before they got to it. And then where I come into the play with this for each individual course is looking at longitudinal analysis. and course level assessment and curricular assessment. And so I'm able to take this data, take it back to the curriculum committee, and take it back to individual faculty to help faculty locate areas that need improvement, much like our strengths and opportunities report that we give to students using ExamSoft. Okay, well, that's all I have for you today. I really appreciate you attending, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Jamie. Great presentation. We are going to go ahead and open up the forum for Q&A now. So if you do have questions for Jamie, now is the time to type them into the GoToWebinar control panel under the questions area, and we'll go ahead and read those out so Jamie can answer and respond. We already have a couple come in, so I'm going to go ahead and just jump right in if that's okay with you, Jamie.
Oh, of course, that's perfect.
Perfect. So the first question is, how well attended were the testing consults? Were they mandatory? Did you meet with faculty one-on-one?
So for the testing consults, what we did so far was meet with faculty one-on-one. So it was either faculty reaching out for assistance, or as I was doing longitudinal analysis, noting areas where maybe we could tweak things and reaching out to individual faculty and meeting with them. We do have hopes to do some brown bag lunches for faculty in the future, but we haven't done that yet.
Great. I have a couple of questions that are kind of follow-ups to that, so I'm going to group them together. Quite a few people have asked the same question. Can you speak to what the setup of this process was like and how you got faculty bought into the process and what they were responsible for doing?
Okay, well, for buy-in for faculty, many faculty are interested in improving their exams, and those are the faculty that I'm working with right now. So the faculty who are very interested and very motivated for self-improvement in that area. And so I think that it was easy for me so far because of that. I don't anticipate I'll have too much difficulty recruiting faculty who maybe testing and assessment is not their main focus, and maybe they have other competing priorities. But what we're doing now is just offering it to people who have an interest and a need, and thinking about how to branch that out further. And I think in our school, brown bag lunches is really the main way to get faculty in. So if we can announce that a few weeks ahead of time and then a few days ahead of time and have something interesting there where they can just drop in at their leisure, that seems to work for us.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is, who was involved in deciding the folder or category structure that you're using? Was that a committee, or was that just you coming up with that and then everybody kind of fell in line? What was that like?
So in the beginning, it was me, and that was very difficult because I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't exactly know what I wanted to measure. And so about a year into using ExamSoft, I actually met with the curriculum committee and said, here's how I had structured ExamSoft. I don't know that it's capturing everything that we need. What do we need to do to revamp it? And as a committee, we decided to pare it down and to structure it the way it is currently.
Okay. Next question is it safe to assume that item difficulty is subjective and determined by the instructor?
Well, it depends on what you mean by item difficulty. So if you're looking at statistical analysis and looking at the p-value, which is the level of difficulty of the item, that is not a subjective measure. But if you're thinking about it in terms of item writing, so in the very beginning as you're coming up with your item and you're writing it, and you think it's a difficult question or you think it's an easy question, that is where it is subjective. So until you get your statistics back, you don't really know how the exam item performs. Does that answer the question?
I think so. If not, I'll get a follow-up one if not.
Okay.
Oh, yes, they say it does. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Next question is, did you meet with individual faculty and then with course faculty in a group? How was that set up?
So for testing consults, I meet with individual faculty and go over individual needs. Um, but for curricular improvement, so we do a curricular quality assurance kind of process. Faculty are brought into the curriculum committee meeting, usually about once a year, once every other year, to touch base. And so then that was the lead course faculty that would come into that committee meeting, bringing in what their strengths and weaknesses are along with the ExamSoft data to talk about, how are they meeting their course objectives and if there's anything that we need to do as a curriculum committee to make changes, or is there anything they need to do as a faculty to make changes? So two separate ways that we approach that.
Lovely. Next question is, are you sharing any of this data with students, specifically on their performance to certain learning outcomes?
We are actually. So what we're doing now, of course, the students get their strengths and opportunities report after every exam, and we do immediate secure review after every exam. So students are getting first their immediate feedback, and then after faculty make any adjustments to items on the exam that need to be made, then the students receive their final score and a strengths and opportunities report. Now, where they get more specific information is actually only if they're either borderline performing in an exam in a course, or if they have a vested interest. Then we bring students in. So if students really want to know how they're working out, they can come to me, and I work with all of the students in our program. So it's about 360 students. And I can give them their information and sit down and talk with them about it. And for every course where students are struggling, and so for struggling for us, we define that as a program as having an exam average of less than 75%. So our passing on exams has to be 70% for our program. So if after two exams a student's performing less than 75%, then I meet with them individually and send them specific information on their performance based on their ExamSoft data.
Lovely, great, thank you. That is all the questions that we have for now, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Just a couple of closing remarks before we end the presentation this afternoon. Jane, would you like to share your email address in case anybody has any follow-up questions?
Oh, sure. I have an easy email address. It's leejd, so LEEJD @jmu.edu.
Lovely. Also, if you have questions for ExamSoft specifically, you can reach us at info@examsoft.com. When you close out of the webinar, you will get a pop-up that will have a quick 5-question survey on it. We would appreciate everybody taking just a couple of seconds to fill that out so that we can continue to provide relevant content in all of these webinars. Again, I'd like to thank Jamie for a wonderful presentation. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate everybody who took time out of their afternoon to attend. I know everybody has lots of projects going on this summer, getting ramped back up for the fall semester, so thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon, and we hope to have you back in a couple of weeks for our next webinar. Thanks so much.